I was watching the Game of Thrones Season 8 premiere a couple weeks back, and to be honest, there was a lot of baggage going into that episode for me. I found this show fairly late into its popularity, having finally caved into watching it for the first time a little bit before its Season 6 premiere, and then immediately fell in love and binged the entire thing. There was an attraction I've never felt to a show before. It was a combination of particularly incredible writing combined with a specific appeal to my taste that birthed the fantasy series that would be my and many other people's addiction for the years to come. But something along the lines went wrong. Season 7 came out and it wasn't good. Now, a lot of people point fingers to the idea that around this time, Game of Thrones went past the published material of the George R.R. Martin novels, and that's true as a general statement. I think you can see a notable downgrade in quality when veering away from the books more often than not, but what specifically is the issue? Well, it was when I was watching this Season 8 premiere that it kinda clicked with me. The characters aren't talking the same. Or maybe they are, but who they talk to and why they're talking to them has changed from what we've all come to know and love from the series. Game of Thrones is an incredibly political show by every sense of the word. Not only in the idea of kings, queens, and governing bodies, but in the very basic sense of competing motivations among a variety of characters. The story has never been so linear as to have a singular protagonist or villain, which is why the structure of the novels by George R.R. Martin are separated into individual points of view for each chapter. This framework inherently creates conflict. Cersei arranges for King Robert to be killed, but Ned knows that Cersei's son isn't the true heir, which gives Robert's brother Stannis the claim to the throne, but Cersei kills Ned to keep this a secret, causing Ned's son to lead the North against her, which allows the Greyjoys to take Winterfell, and so on and so forth. When you have so many moving pieces, each and every scene is filled to the brim with potential conflict. This conflict creates plot progression and character development. Season 8's premiere consisted of about 18 to 20 scenes depending on your definition, and the common issue I found myself noticing over and over again was a lack of conflict. The show has been relegated to basically two different locations, King's Landing and Winterfell. Over at Winterfell, we have the allied forces of Daenerys and Jon Snow. The amount of players on the field has shrunk to an increasingly small amount, and the motivations are becoming very aligned. I think this is fairly evident in one of the first moments of the episode in which Tyrion and Varys sit in a carriage marching into the north. They toss each other some quick dwarf and eunuch jokes, and then we move on forward. These are two of the most intelligent men in Westeros, both having been behind some of the show's greatest and cleverest moments. Yet we find ourselves watching them make idle conversation and cracking insults. What is the purpose of this scene? In a perfect story, every moment in every scene pushes us further in the narrative. When a character does something, it has to tell us about who they are as people or establish something that is used later on. It needs to build the story. If it's not doing this, then it's a superfluous scene and should be cut. What does this moment with Varys and Tyrion establish? That they've come with Daenerys to the north? I kind of assumed that already. That Tyrion makes jokes in high-pressure situations? Great. I knew that when he was on trial for murdering Joffrey. There is no conflict between these characters. They have no opposing motivations, at least not in any clear way. I don't expect they'd say anything but idle conversation, I just don't really know why we'd need to see that. But this is a small moment, and I'm willing to overlook minor faults if the show is able to deliver elsewhere, and this episode just wasn't. Now, it's not that there is no dissent among the crowds of Winterfell. A strong sect of the population, including Sansa, believe that Jon may have made a mistake in pledging himself to Daenerys. I think this is a fantastic central conflict to build the final season around. And hey, we still got a ways to go, so that may very well be the plan. But how this conflict is being actualized is a bit lacking. This is particularly frustrating in the scene early on where the Northerners hold a council discussing the plan moving forward. The people of the North make valid concerns about Jon's pledge. They made him king and he came back having relegated his title to serve under Daenerys. But Jon counters with his own valid perspective, which is that titles don't matter. Positions don't matter because without the aid of Daenerys, the White Walkers will kill every last person in that room. He did what he needed to do to save his people. Neither group is entirely wrong, and that's the beauty of Game of Thrones. But when this conflict is explored further, it's cut off prematurely. Sansa asks how they're going to feed this new army and these two dragons, an important question that they as leaders need to answer. But Daenerys gives a snide remark, and that's the end of the scene. This happens again later when Sam learns what happened to his father and brother at the hands of his new queen. Devastated by the news, he confronts Jon about whether or not this was right. But Jon dodges the question entirely. He doesn't answer what he would have done, and when asked if Daenerys is the type of person who'd give up their crown to save their people, we cut away. Many people who enjoyed this episode will throw around the idea that this is all just setup. And that's true. This is just setup, and nothing more. An episode that only exists to set up future episodes is a boring one. Ideally, we accompany moments like that with moments of payoff or some development of satisfaction. For example, let's take a look at another season premiere. In Season 4, Episode 1, Ygritte and Tormund plan their invasion of Castle Black, Sansa is given the necklace that would kill Joffrey by Ser Dantos, Shae and Tyrion argue about their relationship, and Cersei and Jaime get into a fight about his time gone. All of these are set up. And in that same episode, Jon Snow goes on trial for his time with the Wildlings, Daenerys finds slave children crucified outside of Meereen, and Arya and the Hound take down a group of Lannister soldiers, reuniting her with Needle. These are all intense moments that make the episode incredibly interesting, while also in a way setting things up on their own. Jon Snow's trial sows the seeds for his rise to Lord Commander. Daenerys' reaction to the slave children lead to a number of problems with the Masters. And Arya's tag team with the Hound sets up their dynamic as being more of a partnership than we may have anticipated. When we take scenes as singularly purposed, we undermine the complexity that was such a huge selling factor in those original seasons of Game of Thrones. You may be asking yourself, well, can't a reunion in itself be satisfying? Can't a reunion count as payoff? It certainly could, in particular circumstances, but only when those characters reuniting actually capstones or at least progresses their arcs. I think towards that Jon and Arya scene, and I find myself questioning if it even matters. She sneaks up on him in the Godswood, which yes does foreshadow her doing the same thing to the Night King, but honestly you don't need to prove to me any further that Arya is a capable assassin. She did murder the entire Frey house by herself. Then they compare swords and she questions his loyalty a bit. Remove this from the episode and nothing about either character changes and the plot progresses as is. The only repercussion is fans going, well, where is the Arya-Jon reunion? This scene was birthed from obligation, not the benefit of the narrative. To examine the Sansa and Tyrion scene, they actually got pretty close to something worthwhile. They briefly reminisce on their time married in King's Landing, and Tyrion remarks on how intelligent Sansa has become, while Sansa comments on Tyrion's lack of intelligence. That small interaction actually does matter for her character, considering her place back in Season 1 and the growth that has occurred over this time. Sansa really is intelligent now, and has learned the Game of Thrones from her time with the likes of Cersei, Littlefinger, and even Tyrion. Not only is she recognized from one of the best, but she goes out of her way to knock him down a peg, showcasing her superiority. My only complaint with this scene is that it kinda stops there. To go back to our central conflict, these two characters actually are opposed. Sansa is spearheading the argument against Jon having pledged himself to Daenerys, whom which Tyrion is a loyal advisor to. But this scene is cut short to make room for what? Attempting to orchestrate the amount of reunions they did in that first episode was maybe their biggest mistake, as valuable time was wasted on things that don't matter and taken from things that could have been a lot better. You know, I keep finding myself being pulled back to Season 4. With the trial of Tyrion, the murder of Shae, Oberyn versus the Mountain, the death of Ygritte, and a whole slew of other great moments, it really does feel like it may be Game of Thrones at its peak. But beyond these overtly amazing scenes, we also have some understated, more overlooked encounters. For example, in the aforementioned premiere episode, we get the reunion of Tywin and Jaime. Jaime had just made his way back to King's Landing after being a prisoner to the north for over 2 seasons. And in his return, he dons the golden armor of the Kingsguard and is gifted a Valyrian steel sword forged from the remains of Ned Stark's ice. But Tywin expresses that he thinks Jaime should retire from his position as Kingsguard and instead go back to Casterly Rock, positioning himself to rule the Lannister family. This is a great character revealing moment because it pits two opposite motivations that we might not have realized are as opposite as they were. Pride in your family is an almost defining aspect of culture in Westeros, particularly in the more prestigious of names. For Tywin, the title of Lannister was worth so much that he begrudgingly raised and tolerated a child that he absolutely despised. He assembled an army to fight for Tyrion despite constant remarks on how much Tyrion was a disgrace to their family, and that pride was felt in all of the Lannisters. Or so we thought. In the scene, Jaime protests and refuses to go back to Casterly Rock, demanding that he stay in King's Landing instead. He claims that he has no desire to take a wife or raise a family, and that all he wants is to be there in the capital. And while it's unstated, we gather at that moment that the reason is simple: Cersei. It's all for Cersei. Jaime doesn't care about the Lannisters, he cares about her. He cares about himself, he cares about Tyrion. What could have been an aligning motivation between these two characters, Jaime and Tywin, instead bared the slightest of differences. And that difference became the focus and conflict of this scene. This is a reunion well done. It doesn't exist out of obligation. It takes two characters with a fundamental conflict in their motivations and explores that. The characters don't just stop talking halfway through the conversation, they don't idly chat with each other to pass the time. Every moment is used deliberately and with purpose. Thank you for watching, guys. We're still only halfway into this final season of Game of Thrones, so by far nothing is definite. No nails in the coffins just yet. After a somewhat disappointing Season 7, I really was hoping we'd kick it off with a bang, and I don't think we quite got that. but the final episodes of any season have almost always been the best, and I don't think it's too far gone for them to make a strong recovery. So by the new gods and the old, let's all just say a prayer and hope for the best. If you liked the video, please leave a like and share it with anyone who you think might enjoy it. As always, this has been brought to you by our lovely patrons over at patreon.com/KatoYT. Paige Mulder, Hunter 2011 Dick Writing Association, Jeffrey B, Anwar Ali, H2 Mass, Spencer Irulik Games, Doji, Gage Lambert, and Lerpa Anuj. Thank you all for the support. My name is Hoodie, this is Kato, and I'll see you soon.